I'm going to take a quick look at what some of the problems are with all of these various, like, sort of government agencies that make up the bureaucracy. The first is just how, for at least some of early American history, how these agencies, like the vacancies within them, would be filled. So oftentimes, presidents used all of these appointments to lead these agencies as like political payoffs or political paybacks. It was a way to like reward your supporters, and like you're not necessarily putting the most qualified person in a position to lead these agencies. It's like a reward for them helping you get elected. That's often known as patronage, giving jobs to your supporters, or the spoil system. That's from like the presidency of Andrew Jackson, where again, like to the victors go the spoils, and you're sort of using again the vacancies in these positions to be filled by again your supporters. Um, so that changes a little bit in 1883 with the Pendleton Act, and when that was passed by Congress. So the person in the bottom right hand corner of the screen is James Garfield, and he was assassinated in 1881 by an individual that helped get him elected, a guy named Charles Guiteau, and felt like Garfield owed him like a job for his help in getting him elected. Garfield didn't really believe in the idea of the spoil system, and as a result, he was assassinated by Guiteau, who was disgruntled and didn't get a job. This leads to the passing of the Pendleton Act to sort of reform the way government jobs were given out. And now lower level positions require some sort of like testing. So they're like merit based. So you're giving jobs to the most qualified people. That's like some lower level government positions. But like for example, today the cabinet positions still are given out largely based on like a reward or like loyalty to a presidential candidate. It's not like always the Secretary of Transportation is like the foremost authority on transportation. So one of the knocks against these agencies is that they're often filled with political appointees and not necessarily the most qualified people for the job. Another sort of issue with these agencies is that they're wasteful. That too many of these government agencies essentially do the same thing, and that the government as a whole is just wasting money by having three or four different sort of agencies all sort of in some capacity deal with the same idea. For example, there are 9 different government agencies that all have a hand in dealing with food safety. Critics of the bureaucracy would say that's ridiculous. Like, why not eliminate some of those agencies and just have one or two that maybe deal with the same topic? Another one, unhealthy competition. So, unfortunately, one of the things that you see is that many of these agencies, you like to think that they all view each other as being on the same team, working on behalf of the United States government. But then oftentimes, like they're competing for relevance and they're competing for limited budget funds. So you definitely see some unhealthy competition between these various government agencies. One of the things that came out of the 9/11 report, which was a government-sponsored sort of investigation into how sort of September 11th happened, and how the government didn't like know that that was being planned, was that the FBI and the CIA sort of had this unhealthy competition, that each of them was sort of like vying for sort of like limited budget funds and like recognition, and that they were very hesitant to cooperate with each other. That maybe each had like a piece of the puzzle that didn't make any sense on their own, involving like hints about 9/11 happening, and they weren't really willing to share puzzle pieces with the other agency. And unfortunately, disaster sort of like resulted. So that's when Homeland Security was formed, and it sort of like forced cooperation between the FBI and like the CIA. That's definitely another thing that happens is like these agencies sort of looking at each other as competitors and not cooperating with each other. And then the other one is like the idea that many of these agencies in themselves, they become like too powerful, and they actually violate the concept of separation of powers. So, like for example, let's just say the Congress passes a law to increase automobile safety standards by the end of 2020, with the goal of reducing like vehicular deaths, like deaths in automobiles. Well, Congress is not made up of transportation experts, right? That's what government agencies do. So they might just pass like a general law with this like stated goal, saying that they want to increase automobile safety standards by 2020 with the goal of reducing like automobile deaths. But then what they ultimately do is they allow the Department of Transportation to decide how to best accomplish this. This is called bureaucratic discretion, when Congress sort of leaves it up to the agency that's most related to the topic of the law to figure out a way to make this happen, right? So let's say in this case, the Department of Transportation decides that they're going to require all automobiles to have driver and rear seat airbags by 2019. It's a little outdated, the example. But like that's how the Department of Transportation is going to accomplish Congress's goal. Like they were given the discretion by Congress to do this, and now what they've done is come up with a specific way. This is called like rulemaking, where this government agency comes up with sort of the specifics to fill in the gaps of like Congress's law. And then the Department of Transportation may investigate companies that don't comply, right, and actually fine them. This is referred to as administrative adjudication, fancy word, but it's when an agency sort of follows up to make sure that its rules are being followed. And if a company's not, or a group's not following them, they have the ability to punish them. So the knock on this is that essentially this government agency has the ability to sort of do all three phases of the separation of powers. They're making the rules, they're enforcing the rules, and they're settling disputes that arise under the rules and then are offering punishment. So some argue that these agencies within the executive branch are actually doing all three phases of lawmaking that were supposed to be divided out amongst the three separate branches, thus making them too powerful and violating the separation of powers.